Hello and welcome to another breakout session. This is breakout session number 55. And I'm calling this one Edcaged. And you'll find out why in just a minute. But first, I would like to say hi to all the Guitar League members out there around the country that might be watching. And I would ask anybody who's watching, if you haven't subscribed already, if you'll please subscribe to my channel, hit the little bell. If you like it, hit the like button. I sure appreciate it. Okay, so with a lot of help, I made a little educational tool that I'll show you more about that has to do with what we're talking about today. And what we're talking about today, and you'll have materials, you'll have some printouts down in the description so you can see what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about today is obviously the cage system, but looking at it from a different angle. You know, I'm a big proponent of learning all the notes on the fretboard, and I still am. I'm not saying you don't need to do that. You do need to do that so that you know where the root note of everything is all over the fretboard on any string, okay? But having said that, I want to take it a step further now, and I want you to learn the note numbers of the scale, the intervals of the scale. And you'll be pretty amazed, I think. This is a breakout alert or a breakthrough alert today. I think you're going to see some very interesting things. Now I'll show you a close-up of this little tool, and then we'll be right back. So here's a close-up of my little educational tool. And what you can see is we're starting here with an E-shaped chord, an E-shaped, a D-shaped, a C-shaped, a A-shaped, a G-shaped, and then back to a E-shape. So what my little tool helps you do is, if we were to move this back, let's say this way, so that we now start with the C shape. Don't worry about the numbers up top right now, but if we started with the C shape, you'll see that the 1s, 3s, and 5s are in exactly the same places that they were. The 5s are upside down here because we're looking into a mirror kind of thing. But you can see that the shapes follow each other. So no matter what fret you're on, if you started, let's say we started on the 5th fret, like right about here, okay? Now would be, this is a C-shaped D, and that's a D-shaped D, C-shaped D, A-shaped D, G-shaped D, back to an E-shaped D, and so on, another back to D-shape. So you can move this around and it'll help you. It's hard to translate this onto the film, but it's really a clear thing here. Okay, so obviously, you know, that little tool, we're like talking into a mirror, it's upside down. But when you have it in your hand or something like it, or just on a piece of paper where these note numbers go, you will be shocked. Okay, so first point I want to make is, we're starting with E. We're doing a cage system, but we're starting with E because that's like the first, you know, kind of a chord on the fretboard that we're going to run into, okay? So the first thing that I want to do is, we're demonstrating it in E. First point I want to make is the root string of all the different caged chords. Okay, so when we're thinking of an E-shaped chord, and let's just talk about that real quick for the beginners. This isn't necessarily for beginners, but it should be, okay? then you'll become an intermediate real fast. But when we talk about an E-shaped chord, a D-shaped chord, we're not talking about like you drew out an E, okay? We're talking about the shape that you make to make the chord in the first position on the guitar, okay? So, you know, we got an E, a C, a G, an A, a D. You know, that's the shapes we're talking about. So, all the E-shaped chords, we think about the roots being on the E string, on either one of the E strings, okay? That's the root for an E chord. For a D chord, we're going to think about the root being on the D string. For a C chord, because there is no C string, we have to think about the root being, let's think about it being on the B string. Okay, the root of a C-shaped chord, let's think about it being on the B string. And the root of a G-shaped chord is going to be on the G string. Okay, so I think I covered that all now. Okay, so that's the first point I wanted to make. Second point I want to make is the order of the chord tones. Now, rather than memorizing every note in a scale, every note name like E, A, B, C, D, okay? I mean, it's pretty easy to remember the C scale, what notes are in a C scale. But if you get in an F sharp scale or something, it's a little difficult to have that in your memory, what the note, what's the third of an F sharp. You know, you could figure it out, but it would take time. But what I want to show you today, and we're talking about the 1, 3, 5 interval of a scale, okay, which is the major chord, okay? All the 1, 3s, and 5s are in exactly the same place in every shape. In other words, let me clarify that. In the E-shape chord, it's going to be a 1, a 5, a 3, a 1, a 5, a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 1. Okay? You'll see that in the chart. Okay, so every E-shaped chord is going to be a 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. Okay? That's the numbers of the chord. Okay? So in other words, if you just came up to F, you don't have to remember what the 1, 3, and 5 is as far as what the note name is. Okay? But you just know that this would be the, you know, the first string would be the 1, second string would be the 5, third string would be the 1, then the 3, then the 5, then the 1. It's exactly the same thing, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So on my little chart that I made, my little slide rule, you can slide the E-shaped chord up if you wanted to, and like it to G, and you know that it's the same 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1 in any E chord, okay? This is the beauty of that. So that means the same thing happens in every shape. So every shape, the 1, 3, and the 5 are going to be in exactly the same place. So whether you're playing a D chord, okay, which would be a 1, 5, 1, 3, right? If you were playing that same chord with an E chord, it would be the same thing. It'd be a 1, 5, 1, 3. The E-shaped D chord. I mean the D-shaped E chord. Okay? I know I'm getting a little confusing already, but my point is that every shape, the 1, 3, and 5 is going to be in the same place. So what does this all mean? Well, it means that you don't have to remember note names, and it also means that when you're playing a song, you can play the chord tones of the chord. And a lot of times, in most cases, probably in every case, all the chord shapes are around the same place. In other words, if you're playing in between the 3rd and the 6th fret, you're going to find all of the chord shapes there. Okay, so an E shape, a C shape, a D shape, an A shape. And it also helps to try to memorize in a scale what the 1, 4, 5 chord might be, and you can find that shape. So if we're playing in the key of G and this is the 1 chord, that's an E shape, and we want to go to the 4 chord, that's going to be a C, and we know right where the 1, 3, 5 of the C is. And then if we wanted to have a D, we could use an E shape. Well, actually that's a C shaped D, and they'd all be right there, so you can follow the chord tones. 2 of my favorite YouTube teachers are Brian of Active Melody and Guthrie Trapp. And they're always talking about playing the chord tones over the chord changes, you know. So, okay, so that was the second thing I wanted to say. The third thing that I wanted to say, and this was interesting too, I guess I just missed this, but the chord shapes always follow the same progression all the way around. So in other words, if we started with an E, the next chord shape is going to be a D. Following that is going to be a C. Following that is going to be an A. Following that is going to be a G. And following that is going to be an E again. So it just keeps going around. Okay, so after every E is going to be a D. After every D is going to be a C. After every C is going to be an A. After every A is going to be a G. After every G is going to be an E again. Okay, so those shapes don't change. So no matter where you start on the fretboard, that's the order it goes. And no matter which chord you start with, if you started with a C, like most cases when we talk about the cage, we're talking about starting with a C. Okay, then the next chord that you run into, C shape, is going to be an A shape. And then after an A shape, you know, so this would be an A shape C. After an A shape C is a G shape C. After that is an E shape, and then after that is a D shape. And then it starts all over again. So that was a big breakthrough, I think. Knowing that that doesn't change. And it would help to memorize that shape going back the other way too. Okay? So what we're trying to do is look at that chart or make your own and just start to memorize the 1, 3, 5 in every shape. And then know that you can move the root to that, and the 1, 3, 5 of whatever key you're in is going to be in the same place. This is like a breakthrough moment. Think about it. I don't have to remember what the F sharp scale is, what the 1, 3, and 5 is in the F sharp. Okay, because I know it's going to be boom, boom, boom. It's going to be right there. So I can play in that key and hit the chord tones. Now, if we find the 1, the 3, and the 5, that's a major triad, as we well know, okay? Or a arpeggio, you can arpeggiate it or use it as a triad, okay? The next thing, once we know where those things are, like let's say the 3, let's say we're in A, this is the 1, and this is the 3. We're playing like G-shaped A, let's say. So if this is the 3rd, we know that. If we go down a half a step, that's going to be the flat 3, which would be the minor 3rd. So if you were playing in a minor key, it wouldn't take you too much to figure out where the minor 3rd is. Okay? Once you memorized where the 1, 3, and 5 is, you can find like the minor 3rd real quick. And another very important color tone is going to be like the 7 or the flat 7. So if you know where the 1 is, let's say we're in D, you know where the 1 is, the flat 7 to D is going to be just down 1 fret. A whole step, not 1 fret. 2 frets, really. But the major 7 would be just down a half step. Okay? So you can start, once you memorize where the 1, 3, and 5s are, they're all going to be in the same place. Then you could think about, well, let me learn where the flat 7s are and the flat 3rds, because then I can play minor, or I can play a dominant 7 arpeggio, or chord tone over a progression. So I know this is a little crazy and it takes a little time to get this concept, but I think, if you ask a lot of the pros that I ask about what they're thinking about when they're playing leads and stuff, a lot of them are thinking about chord shapes, okay, and chord tones. They're not necessarily thinking note names, although they know the note names because that's how they get to find where the root is of a chord. Okay, it is knowing where the root is on any given string. Okay, so you got to learn that. But when you're trying to think of things fast, it's a lot easier to just think of the chord shapes and then what's the note numbers within that chord shape, and you don't have to do a lot of thinking. Most of those guys, but and eventually you're not going to think about anything. It's just going to happen because it's all in your hand. And I'd like to get there someday. Just kidding. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm probably going to have to do some follow-ups to this because I think it's a lot to think about at one. You can eat an elephant a bite at a time, and this is like one little bite of an elephant. So hopefully you're going to get something out of this, and I will see you in the next video. Be safe out there.